Right. So Hungary has assumed the presidency of the EU Council until the end of 2024. And Viktor Orban went to the EU Parliament and gave a speech where he shared the vision that he has for Europe with other MEPs. And as you expect, we had lots of really nice moments there. Orban really made the case for patriotism in Europe. And predictably, people only had personal accusations to make against him that he's a Russian asset.
So just sorry to pause. What does presidency of the European Council do?
Well, it's
probably not that much, right?
Not that much. It's a rotating position every 6 months. But I mean, you could say that it has a sort of symbolic nature, because the president of the EU Council gets to make more speeches and stuff.
Yeah, a certain amount of power to define the agenda.
Yeah,
it's like being leader of the House of Commons in a strange sort of way.
Right. It kind of gives a strong push for the tone that is being adopted. But as you will see, a lot of people are just not having it, and they want Europe to be what it is right now, multiculturalism hellhole.
Is this more evidence of Europe going far right?
It depends what you mean. Yeah, but yeah, whatever.
Well, it was quite clear. Anyway.
Right, so before we say more about that, we have the Islander magazine, issue number 2, as you see here, with $14.99. It's a really good bargain, and I think it is the last day where people can...
It is indeed the last day.
Yeah, so
will not be reprinted, and you can't get the articles that are in it anywhere else, so do go and get it now.
So do check it, and also check our lovely merch here. We have cups, mugs, t-shirts. So thank you very much. Don't miss the opportunity. Right, let's go here to Viktor Orban. So basically he made several key points. One of it is we are not members of the EU because of what it is right now. We're members of the EU because of what it could be. And by that he means a union that respects the sovereignty of member states and the culture of member states. And he is essentially saying that right now the EU is ravaged by illegal migration, by the war in Ukraine, and also by the loss of economic competitiveness, and that this has to change. And everything the opposition had to say was, you're a Russian asset, you're a Chinese asset, and everything is okay.
Right. I mean, I think he's got a very rose-tinted view of what the EU is meant to be, from what he's just said there.
Well, if it could be unburdened by what has been, maybe we could have a different vision for it.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that I agree with you, Carl. Unburdened by what has been, but the problem with the EU is that it's just such a legalistic organism, and so much of its there are so many inbuilt destinations written into its treaties, and they'd be incredibly arduous to have to kind of course correct at this point and make it more of a confederation of states rather than a federal superstate, which I imagine is what Orban means by he wants it just to be a confederation of cooperating but nevertheless sovereign states. I don't think that's likely to happen anytime soon.
Yes,
I don't think that was the purpose of it at all either.
The real sort of idealistic visionaries of it, people like, what's he called, Jean Monnet, who certainly saw it as a kind of way of...
United States of Europe.
Indeed, it's definitely.
But to add to your point, there have been voices within the EU who are saying basically we need to expand the union, and they don't say anything about the direction towards which they expand, but it is implicit. It's implicit that they treat it just as a managerialist organization that is functioning so as to crush the national identity of the member states. But what is interesting here is just with other figures like Milei and Bukele at the UN is that we have to see what these dissident voices mean for the people. Because, for instance, I don't know about Orban. I don't know about what, I don't know about a lot about what he's doing. I'm not defending everything that he says. But what is interesting is that it seems to me to be that he is the only voice within the EU who just calls for sanity. He's one of the few voices, let me say, the EU calls for sanity. And here we have the Slovenian MEP of European Parliament, Branko Grims, who basically said that Hungary is peaceful, Hungary is safe, it's not like the rest of the EU. Yeah. And we owe to Orban the example of Hungary, because Hungary is against the wokeness DI agenda and also against illegal migration.
Yep.
And they have a leader that says that if we are attacked, I will defend my country.
Which is why they hate him.
You can see exactly. So I have some clips here where from his speech, where he says basically facts are facts. Whatever other people say, facts speak for themselves. And he had some beefs with Ursula von der Leyen. And let me just show you some of the things that he said. I'll fast forward to 040.
Just before we begin, though, let's just remember who Ursula von der Leyen is. She's the president of the Commission. You didn't vote for her. You didn't have any opportunity to vote for her. And yet they'll call Viktor Orban a dictator, even though he's won 4 elections, is it?
Yes.
And there was a period of time where he was out of office as well, not like normal how dictators operate.
No.
Very unusual for a dictator to spend any time out of office and then get elected back into the office.
Yes.
So I want to make it very clear, there are people in the European Union who take on a dictatorial aspect to their office, and it's not Viktor Orban. It is in fact the people who accuse him.
Yes, exactly. Unelected bureaucrats.
Yes.
Right, so here we have Orban talking about migration policy. I'll translate, and says, since 2015, Hungary and I personally have been engaged in serious political debates on migration. I've seen a lot of things. I've seen initiatives, packages, proposals that have been greeted with high hopes, and all of them have failed. He's talking about the multiculturalist dream that everything can work. And he says the only reason for this, believe me, is that without external hotspots, we cannot protect Europeans from illegal migration. So what is interesting here is that he says something that is obvious. He says that what happens is, with a lot of people who are asking for asylum, they come within the union and they stay within the union for as long as their application is pending. And then even if their application isn't get accepted, they have deportation orders, and a lot of deportation orders expire and are not enforced. So he says we need just external hotspots. People have to apply from outside the union to come within the union. That seems to me to be just common sense. And also he says something, he speaks in the language of leftists here, where he says that illegal migration in Europe has led to anti-Semitism, violence against women, and homophobia. And says facts are facts, whether you like them or not.
And this is obviously true as well.
This is obviously true. And Europe is considerably less safe. I think that this is demonstrable, and we have statistics for it. And I will show you what happened also about Germany. Now here we have Ursula von der Leyen, who gave a headline address in the European Parliament today, and she essentially had to say that she's going to address 3 points: war in Ukraine, economic competitiveness, and migration. And essentially her whole shtick was, you're a dictator who is a Russian asset and a Chinese asset.
Again, I really want to stress, no one voted for von der Leyen.
Yes.
She's even considered something of a failed politician in Germany. I mean, this is the other thing as well. It's not just it's not just that like being elected has some sort of automatic value. It means to an end. It means that there are direct lines of accountability between the decisions you make and whether those are vindicated at the next election. And Orban has, whatever you think of him, consistently been vindicated in terms of the policies he pursues. He's immensely popular in Hungary, and he's completely redefined Hungarian politics.
And it's really good because we have some hard evidence published by the federal German police about crime statistics in Germany, which is the country of Ursula von der Leyen. And here we have her saying, I want to address the Hungarian people. We're one family. Your story is our story. Your future is our future. Hopefully not.
Jesus Christ.
Hopefully not. That's
genuinely chilling.
Yeah.
Genuinely chilling.
Whenever you hear a German talking like this.
Yes. 10 million Hungarians or 10 million good reasons to keep shaving up.
If the Hungarian future is really to be defined by Ursula von der Leyen, I don't doubt that 10 million Hungarians might still be around, but how many non-Hungarians will there be in Hungary as well? That's also worth considering.
I mean, when an unelected German is suddenly in charge of Europe, speaking like this, You've got to be worried. Now
Your future is our future.
Yeah, but she's just like, numbering them. There are 10 million of you, are there? Okay, good.
Yeah, and we have here from the European Conservative a shocking federal police report that talks about the effects that this vision of Ursula von der Leyen has for her country, for Germany. The Germany that gave birth to her and that she is supposed to represent, unless I'm completely mistaken. And I'll give you just some very hard evidence. This is a report by the Federal Police of Germany that published some statistics, and it says annual crime for the year 2023 has risen by 12%, 12.5%. Crime in 2023 in Germany has risen by 12.5% comparatively to the year 2022. Non-Germans are 6 times more likely to engage in knife attacks than German citizens.
Sorry, can we just... So the total number there was 790,000?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, thousands of crime per day. Big country, but...
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a big...
You would expect it to have thousands of crimes, but that level of increase in criminality is not acceptable.
Especially when you get granular with the ethnic data on this.
Yeah, so they have 2,165 crimes per day on average. So the non-Germans, I repeat, are 6 times more likely to engage in knife attacks than German citizens. And definitely they're not 6 times the German population. No. So in violent acts were increased by 10%. Sexual violence has increased by 15% to 2,500 cases, which are 8-9 per day. Violence in train stations has risen by 11%, and also pickpocketing incidents have increased by 16%.
Right, so trends bad across the board.
Yeah, so when Ursula von der Leyen sees this Germany and says, everything is okay, your future Hungary is our future, and we're just one happy family, that seems to me like a bad relative. It's a relative that I would not feel particular social bonds towards.
Yeah, I mean, unless she's vacating her office and letting Orban just take over. I imagine the crime rates in Hungary are probably far, far lower, aren't they?
Yeah. No, they are far lower.
Yeah, I bet they are.
But you can't explain these numbers and the overrepresentation of...
I'd be called all sorts of names.
I mean, I wanted to say you cannot explain this without citing the very things that Ursula von der Leyen does not want us to talk about. And she thinks talking about consists hate speech. Now here, Viktor Orban basically said that he is being criticized as being a Russian asset, but whether we like it or not, when we have wars must stop, and there needs to be a ceasefire, and there need to be lines of communication rather than just
any of these sort of allegations without any kind of substantive evidence. It reminds me of the kind of worst of 20th century partisanship. It's utterly irrational, and it's just a way of smearing the opponent. Unless they have here's some evidence that Vladimir Putin has been communicating with Viktor Orban or something like this. Unless they have something to say and actually lay at his feet, then it's nothing, and you can just safely ignore it. That's how I feel about it.
But Carl, I think you should consider that Orban is somehow against the woke agenda, and I don't know to what extent people can have it. Here we have Ursula von der Leyen in January this year saying that she is going to withhold
around 20 billion euros remain frozen. They are suspended for reasons that include concerns on LGBTIQ rights, academic freedom, and asylum rights. Some are blocked under the conditionality mechanism, and they will remain blocked until Hungary fulfills all the necessary conditions.
Just German dictator.
So
what we're looking at here.
Unless you turn Hungary into a place that has the severe crime tendencies of Germany, we're not going to give you funding, and we're going to block your funding. And also
not just the crime tendencies, but unless you're prepared to transition your children and suggest that all things are equal in every way.
That's exactly why people look up to Orban and they say that, we want a Europe that that respects its children and respects
the family,
its younger generation,
honors
and the family.
Actively, yes.
Yeah, and there's another thing, because Hungary is constantly being attacked by the EU.
Yep.
They don't want to comply with the EU Migration Pact. The EU Migration Pact is a pact for the relocation of illegal migrants within the Union, and they find and migrants within the Union, and they find Hungary with 200 million euros.
One of the strange contradictions as well, because these are precisely the sorts of politicians who will claim that this is very culturally enriching. If it really was that culturally enriching, surely there would be a scramble to see who could get the most of them.
Yeah, yes.
It wouldn't be. It's implicitly classified as a burden if you're relocating them in this way.
Yeah. Yes. Here
incentives just wouldn't be necessary.
Exactly.
They'd do it automatically.
I'll show you a very funny response by Orban when he was accused by the other MEP members, the members of the European Parliament and other bureaucrats there, that he has a strong Russian lobby within Hungary that he allegedly...
So just as a quick pause on that as well, like, why would anyone take lectures from the Germans about being Russian assets? So you made your entire country totally dependent on Russian energy and then got screwed over by the Americans when Russia decided it was going to invade Ukraine. Like, I wouldn't take lectures from them anywhere, ever at all about this subject. They've just been totally incompetent on it. Like, just go shut down. Oh, you can't shut down any more nuclear power plants, can you? You've already done that. I'm just so done with this kind of hypocritical moralizing from particularly, German politicians, like EU politicians. I'm not having it.
There are definite national differences in how the Hungarians view Russia and how the Poles view Russia, which are interesting given that they've both got quite similar histories. And Poland's probably been more persecuted by Russia historically than Hungary has, but there was, obviously the Soviet communism and the putting down the uprising in 56, and they also put down the Hungarian liberal national revolution in 1848 as well. The Tsar put that down too. But for whatever reason, the Hungarians to this day take a much more pragmatic view of Russia. It's purely kind of tied to the national interest, whereas in the case of Poland, there is much more of a kind of, I like my Polish friends, but it's a slightly obsessive over concern.
If it helps, I can understand why.
Yes. Oh, totally.
They're very, very close to Russia.
Yes, I totally. But what I was going to say, sorry, is that I'm in Hungary quite a lot, and when I'm at these things, there are far more Poles present than there are Russians. I mean, I've never actually encountered a Russian at one of these sort of conferences in Hungary where people like Orban and Balázs Orban will speak. It's always there are much more Poles who actively hate Hungary and who take a radically different view, actively hate Russia and take a very different view on the war to Hungary there than there are Russian assets sort of milling around.
I have a sense you're going to love the next one, the Spanish person. Let's see what Orban says here. I'll mute him and say, he says, the number of Russians working in Hungary, he says this pure hypocrisy. Last year we issued 3,000 permits. That makes a total of 7,000 Russians working in Germany. And he says there are 300,000 Russians working in Germany. Sorry, I meant Hungary before 7,000. Yeah. 300,000 in Germany.
Precisely my point.
So my head count at these conferences checks out. Then there are barely any Russians.
He says 100,000 in Spain. 100,000 Russians in Spain and about 60,000 Russians in France.
It's very sad.
And I like it. And I'm the one being accused. Yeah, exactly. Like, do not take any goddamn lectures from these.
So good.
They're hypocritical liars.
So good.
Yeah. And when it comes to hypocritical lying, we have the Spanish head of the delegation of the Spanish Vox Party in the European Parliament, Jorge Buxade, yeah. And he called the structure a house of demonic hypocrisy. And he was really...
Nice. Checks out, yeah.
Yeah, he was really... He was really funny because he basically said that Germany and Spain are buying oil and gas from Russia, and they're playing their game, and they accuse Hungary. And basically he says, leftists, this is not a house of democracy. It says this is the house of demonic hypocrisy. And he says the rule of law and the separation of powers is destroyed by leftists throughout the Union.
Yeah.
So you can't talk about threats to democracy when you don't conserve your own house. And what I want to say here, and
it's just, why would I ever listen to any of these people on any of these subjects?
And just to sort of end the segment, he basically says, I'm deeply sorry, but I will not be indebted to you or any of you. If we're attacked, I will defend my country. So what is interesting here is that we see a different vision, one that, as you said before, wasn't the original vision of the EU, but a vision that could happen, that could take hold within the future, because you could say that there is no particular problem with having a union that does respect the sovereignty and culture of each member, because
confederation.
Let's be honest, Europe isn't as powerful as it was 100 years ago or 150 years ago. There are very large players outside of Europe that could play divide and conquer within Europeans, but primarily they shouldn't use the EU to do this. The EU should be the obstacle to foreign interference within Europe. It should be the obstacle to dividing and conquering Europeans. And there's
the problem is, right, the Germans are the obstacle to European solidarity because of this demand, this kind of demand. The Hungarians are not constitutionally the same sort of people as the Germans. They're not incredibly far left, right? They weren't dominated by liberalism and communism, and they were dominated by communism, but like they're very much more obviously a sort of traditional people, and see themselves as such, whereas the Germans are not, and they don't see themselves as such. They're very much concerned with being moderns, and this kind of intransigence and intolerance towards the differences within the European peoples is the problem of the German leadership. It's the German mindset. It's this formatting, leveling view that they have.
But that alternative vision of Europe, therefore, might be helped along by Alternative for Deutschland doing better, because they are not slaves of that modernizing tendency.
But just to add to this, I think that this is very important. And yes, hopefully they'll do well, and there aren't going to be any deviations of the sort we don't want to see. But what seems to me to be particularly important is that now Germany has lost its competitiveness with its net zero policies, and whatever happens in Germany, I think we're not going to talk about a German-led EU anymore.
Well, it depends who's paying the bills, doesn't it?
Yes,
continues paying the bills.
Right now I think the balance of power is shifting within the union. So
quite possibly,
but still, the EU right now is functioning in a way that doesn't respect the identity of Europeans and their culture.
Right now, it's always been this way.
Yes, but we could be unburdened by what has been.
That's fair.
And see what can be.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see more of what we're up to, you can follow Dan's series, Brokenomics. Here he's talking about Tony Blair's new book on leadership. And if you want to see all the other work we're putting out, you can follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.